Imagine a hand resting gently on a thick piece of cold, brushed aluminum. You reach out, and your fingers find a solid, machined metal power switch. You push it down, and you hear a distinct, heavy, mechanical click that feels like you've just engaged the ignition of a classic sports car. Instantly, a soft, warm, almost hypnotic blue glow bleeds into the room, illuminating a wide glass tuning dial. Then comes the true centerpiece of the experience. Your thumb rests against the edge of the iconic Gyro Touch tuning wheel. With a gentle flick, the heavily weighted internal brass flywheel glides silently, spinning the needle across the radio frequencies with a buttery smoothness that feels less like operating an electronic device and more like interacting with a piece of precision-engineered functional jewelry. This sensory experience is the undeniable magic of a 1970s classic Marantz receiver. It grounds you entirely in the physical reality of the machine. But it also raises a fascinating, almost heartbreaking question for anyone who loves vintage audio equipment. How did a brand synonymous with absolute, uncompromising acoustic luxury eventually end up slapping its legendary name onto cheap, hollow plastic stereos sold in discount department stores? The answer to how Marantz sold its soul lies in a devastating corporate split in 1980. A bizarre boardroom deal that literally fractured the brand in two, sending the American market into a spiral of disposable electronics, while the rest of the world quietly pushed into the future of high-end digital audio. To really understand the magnitude of this fall from grace, we have to look at the psychology behind the brand's original success. When Saul Marantz started building amplifiers out of his Kew Gardens home in New York back in 1953, he wasn't just trying to put together functional electronic circuits. He wanted to forge an uncompromising luxury experience. A classic Marantz stereo wasn't just about the technical specifications on a piece of paper. It was about the psychological weight of ownership. Having that beautifully symmetrical, champagne-engraved faceplate sitting on the walnut shelf in your living room signaled something very specific to anyone who walked into your home. It signaled a deep, almost obsessive appreciation for acoustic perfection. It was a status symbol, absolutely. But it was a status symbol built entirely on pure sonic integrity. When you bought a Marantz, you were buying into a philosophy. You were buying into the idea that music shouldn't just be heard in the background. It should be felt, respected, and reproduced with the highest possible fidelity. The typography on the front panel, the perfectly balanced resistance of the bass and treble knobs, the way the light caught the brushed metal. Every single element was designed to make the user feel a sense of control and prestige. But maintaining that level of integrity is brutally expensive. And this brings us to the central conflict of the vintage audio world, the brutal, unapologetic monster receiver wars of the late 1970s. To fund his massive research and development debts, Saul Marantz had actually sold his company to a corporation called Superscope back in 1964. For a while, this was a golden arrangement. Superscope moved manufacturing to Japan, partnering with Standard Radio Corp, which allowed Marantz to maintain its incredible build quality while producing at a scale that made them a global powerhouse. But by the late 1970s, the audio industry had changed. The market had transformed into a relentless, high-stakes arms race against giant Japanese manufacturers like Pioneer, Sansui, and Kenwood. This era was defined by a fascinating absurdity. Companies fought tooth and nail for catalog supremacy, and the battleground wasn't necessarily about who sounded the sweetest at normal listening volumes. It was about raw, terrifying power. It was the era of the monster receiver. Marantz was forced into this spec sheet war, and they responded by engineering absolute behemoths, culminating in machines like the legendary Marantz 2600. The Marantz 2600 is a machine that almost defies logic. It pushed out an absurd 300 watts per channel into 8 ohms. To put that in perspective, a normal living room listening session rarely requires more than 5 to 10 watts of continuous power. Pushing 300 watts through a home stereo is the audio equivalent of driving a top-fuel dragster to the grocery store. It was a machine built strictly to win a war on paper, catering to a consumer fantasy of unlimited power rather than any practical, real-world listening need. It even featured a built-in glowing green oscilloscope on the front panel, allowing the user to visually monitor the audio waveforms in real time, a feature that was undeniably cool, but completely unnecessary for the average consumer. Yet, to truly ground this era and understand why these machines are so revered today, we have to look past the marketing and dive into a passionate technical and philosophical analysis of how these monster receivers were actually built. If you take a screwdriver and strip away the heavy wooden casing of a late 70s Marantz, you are immediately confronted with a level of obsessive engineering that simply does not exist in modern consumer electronics. Inside, you don't find a single cheap green circuit board doing all the work. You find beautifully symmetrical internal layouts. You find massive, heavy toroidal power transformers that made these units weigh as much as a cinder block, sometimes tipping the scales at over 60 pounds. You find giant, beer-can-sized capacitors storing immense amounts of electrical energy to deliver instantaneous bass response. And perhaps most importantly, you find discrete components. These machines were built with individual resistors, transistors, and capacitors that were soldered into place with the explicit intention that they could be serviced. They were built with the philosophy that if a part failed 20 years down the line, a technician could open it up, find the faulty component, unsolder it, and fix the machine. They were not designed for the landfill. They were designed for a lifetime. And then there is the sheer mechanical beauty of the user interface. Take that gyro touch tuning wheel we talked about earlier. It wasn't just a design quirk. The horizontal wheel was attached to a string and pulley system connected to a weighted flywheel. When you spun it, the physical inertia of the brass weight carried the needle smoothly across the dial. It offered a physical, kinesthetic connection to the music that modern digital interfaces, with their sterile touchscreens and infinite scrolling menus, simply cannot replicate. Operating a vintage Marantz required intention. It required you to be present in the moment. But no golden age lasts forever. The tone of the audio industry shifted violently as we hit the turning point, the year 1980. The global economy was shifting. The late 70s brought oil crises, economic recessions, and a changing consumer demographic. Superscope, the parent company of Marantz, found itself drowning in severe financial trouble. To save themselves from total bankruptcy, they made a desperate move. They sold the Marantz brand, the factories, and the entire international distribution network to the European electronics giant Philips. But there was a massive, tragic catch to this deal. A catch that altered audio history. Superscope, in a bid to keep some sort of revenue stream alive, retained the rights to the Marantz name specifically for the North American market. This wasn't just a standard corporate buyout. It was a bizarre, unprecedented fracturing of a legendary brand. You suddenly had a situation where the name Marantz meant two entirely different things depending on which side of the Atlantic Ocean you were standing on. In the United States, under the desperate control of Superscope, the era of decay set in with a ruthless, heartbreaking speed. We witnessed the tragic transition from the golden age of silver-face receivers to the dark, depressing days of the 1980s American audio market. The heavy brushed aluminum, the etched glass, the solid metal knobs, and the massive power transformers were all stripped away. They were too expensive to produce, and the American consumer was increasingly demanding cheaper, more convenient systems. What replaced the legendary silver-face gear was an era widely referred to by vintage audio collectors as BPC black plastic crap. The tactile magic was gone. Solid aluminum switches were replaced by cheap, injection-molded plastic buttons that felt hollow and fragile. When you pushed a button on an 80s American Marantz, the entire thin plastic front panel would flex under the pressure of your finger. The discrete, repairable internal components were swapped out for cheap integrated circuits. The massive, beautiful receivers were replaced by generic, all-in-one rack systems. It is a profound tragedy of industrial design to see the revered Marantz name, a name that once stood shoulder to shoulder with the absolute pinnacle of luxury audio, slapped onto lightweight, fragile, inherently disposable stereo systems sold in American discount department stores right next to the toasters and microwaves. It was a brand surviving in name only, having completely sacrificed its soul to stay afloat in a market that no longer valued longevity. But if you lived across the Atlantic, or in Japan, a completely different story was unfolding. And this is where the history of Marantz becomes incredibly fascinating. While the American market was drowning in black plastic, Philips actually breathed incredible new life into the Marantz brand internationally. Philips, being a massive technological innovator, was deeply involved in the creation of a brand new audio format that was about to change the world. In 1982, the compact disc revolution arrived. Because Philips co-invented the CD, European and Japanese Marantz divisions were suddenly positioned at the absolute bleeding edge of digital audio technology. They weren't building cheap rack systems. They were building some of the finest, most advanced CD players on the planet. And at the center of this international renaissance was a crucial, highly charismatic figure, a man named Ken Ishiwata. Ken Ishiwata was a visionary audio engineer and an absolute legend in the audiophile community. While the US market was suffering, Ishiwata was working in Europe, obsessively tuning and modifying Marantz CD players. He understood that early digital audio, while incredibly clear and free of tape hiss or vinyl pops, often sounded cold, harsh, and clinical. It lacked the warmth and the soul of the analog era. Ishiwata made it his personal mission to fix this. He would take standard European Marantz CD players and meticulously upgrade them. He swapped out standard components for audiophile-grade capacitors, beefed up the power supplies, and heavily modified the analog output stages. He even insisted on wrapping the internal chassis in highly conductive copper to block out electromagnetic interference. His modified machines were so spectacular that Marantz eventually started selling them directly to the public as the legendary KI Signature series. Ken Ishiwata essentially proved that digital audio could still possess a warm, musical, analog soul. It is a stunning dichotomy to look back on. For over 2 decades, you had a brand simultaneously dying a slow, embarrassing plastic death in its birthplace of North America, while simultaneously evolving into a highly respected, cutting-edge audiophile powerhouse overseas. 2 completely different realities, sharing the exact same logo. So, where does that leave the legacy of Marantz today? Thankfully, the story has a resolution. In 2001, Marantz Japan finally managed to buy back the North American rights, reuniting the fractured global brand after 21 years of separation. Today, Marantz is whole again. They lean heavily into their heritage, producing incredible high-end modern gear that pays homage to Saul Marantz's original vision of acoustic luxury. But if you look closely at the modern audio landscape, you'll notice something incredibly telling. Look at the thriving, highly lucrative, and fiercely passionate collector market for that classic 1970s silver face gear. A pristine Marantz 2270 or a fully restored 2600 monster receiver commands an absolute fortune today, often selling for thousands of dollars more than they cost brand new. Why is that? Why are people willing to pay exorbitant prices for 50-year-old electronics? It's because deep down, we recognize what we lost. In our relentless society-wide pursuit of cheaper, lighter, and more convenient technology, we sacrificed the soul of industrial design. We traded magnificent machines built to outlast us for hollow plastic boxes destined for the landfill. We traded the heavy, satisfying mechanical click of a solid metal switch for the silent, frictionless tap of a glass smartphone screen. We gained infinite convenience, but we lost the physical connection to the things that bring us joy. And that is exactly why those surviving heavy metal Marantz receivers glowing warmly in the dark, their gyro touch wheels waiting to be spun, are more precious today than they ever were. They stand as beautiful, 60-pound monuments to an era when we didn't just consume our music. We interacted with it.